Subscribe, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from.
As the investigation expanded beyond the ship itself, the agencies involved began to quietly pull older maritime reports, searching for any precedent involving similar cargo. That's when a pattern emerged. 3 other vessels between 1974 and 1986 had documented unexplained radiation bursts, shadow radar echoes, and irregular route deviations. Yet all 3 cases had been classified under a little-known directive labeled Blue Harvest. The directive ordered immediate suppression of details, reassignment of crew, and sealing of all physical evidence. In 2 of the cases, containers also went missing before inspectors arrived. A decrypted memo from 1981 suggested that these containers weren't intended for transport at all. They were part of a program testing remote energy amplification, possibly connected to battlefield power sources or experimental propulsion systems. But the notes repeatedly warned that the cores exhibited autonomous discharge behavior when disrupted, which might explain the strange M readings from the Gulf Hope. The most disturbing clue came when analysts traced one of the missing container codes to a private storage facility in New Jersey, where it had been logged, briefly, before the facility's entire database crashed and backups were mysteriously wiped. Security footage from that same night showed a power outage lasting exactly 13 seconds, followed by the appearance of condensation on the walls, as if the temperature had dropped 20 degrees in moments. The container in question never appeared on camera. It simply vanished between one frame and the next. Investigators later interviewed a night guard, who reported hearing a low humming noise, like something spinning inside a drum. His statement was dismissed as stress until similar descriptions surfaced from 2 other locations linked to the program. If the Gulf Hope's cargo was designed to be stable only under specific conditions, then breaking the chain of custody could mean that the devices, whatever they really were, had begun operating independently. And the idea that they might still be out there, active and undocumented, turned the case from a maritime incident into one of the most quietly feared security risks of the era. When divers continued re-examining the recovered wreckage months later, they found something the early salvage crews had missed: a section of the lower cargo hold that had been welded shut from the outside. This made no sense. Commercial tankers never seal compartments that way because it prevents emergency access. The welds were newer than the rest of the ship, and matched a military-grade alloy resistant to heat, corrosion, and even moderate radiation. Cutting through it took nearly 12 hours, and when the team finally broke inside, the air that escaped was so stale and metallic that 2 divers experienced severe dizziness and had to be taken off rotation. Inside, the compartment was empty except for a single steel pedestal bolted to the floor, its surface marked with circular impressions, exactly the size of small cylindrical containers. Each indentation showed faint scorch marks, like the metal had been overheated from the inside. Radiation levels were elevated but strangely inconsistent, fluctuating in pulses every few seconds like the fading heartbeat of a machine that no longer existed. A second discovery pushed the investigators from confusion into alarm. Hidden in the ceiling was a waterproof cassette recorder, military issue, with its tape mostly intact. The audio, restored after weeks of work, contained only fragments, the sound of rushing water, distant metal impacts, and a voice repeating, "Protocol 7, the cores are waking." No one could identify the speaker. The logs from the final day revealed that the ship reported no mechanical failures, no fires, no breaches, yet the captain's last transmission, before the emergency beacon activated, was just 11 seconds long, ending mid-sentence with a deafening crack and a burst of static. Some analysts believed it was an onboard explosion, but the hull damage didn't match that theory. Others argued the noise resembled intense electromagnetic interference. If that was true, then the lost cargo wasn't just radioactive, it was active. And whatever it did to the Gulf Hope, it might still be doing somewhere else. Wherever those missing containers ended up, the deeper investigators dug into the Gulf Hope's route, the more the timeline cracked in ways that bordered on impossible. According to the official logs, the tanker left Karachi on June the 11th and maintained a stable route across the Arabian Sea until the morning of June the 16th, when it abruptly altered its trajectory by nearly 37 degrees without any recorded reason. The helmsman insisted he followed the captain's orders, but the captain denied issuing any such command. Radar snapshots later pulled from coastal stations revealed something stranger. For nearly 9 hours the Gulf Hope appeared twice on the same scans, one echo following the real vessel with a delay of about 6 minutes. Experts dismissed it as an artifact until a retired technician admitted that similar shadow ships have been quietly documented since the late 70s. usually linked to vessels that transported sensitive cargo. That same day, during a temporary radio blackout, the ship's Geiger counter logs, normally routine, spiked so sharply that the onboard system auto-saved the data into an encrypted partition usually reserved for classified naval charters. When the Coast Guard accessed it a month later, they found the file corrupted except for a single line: exposure exceeds operational threshold. Cargo integrity compromise. But the Gulf Hope wasn't supposed to carry radioactive materials at all. Meanwhile, a customs officer, who handled the container manifest, claimed he saw 3 entries, that were later erased: UN 3312, sealed cores, low-yield isotope blocks, and the chilling note, transfer only under naval escort. By the time internal investigators tried to question him again, he had already left the country, resigning with a handwritten letter that simply said, "They told me it's safer if I forget what I saw." What pushed the story into full-scale mystery was the discovery that the same container had appeared in a 1979 intelligence memo about an abandoned Cold War program involving experimental radiological power cells, devices rumored to stay active for decades without proper containment. If the Gulf Hope was carrying those, the question became unavoidable: where were they now? By early 1984, scattered reports hinted that the missing container, or its contents, had surfaced hundreds of miles from the port. A remote salvage crew working along a rocky coastline discovered a lead-lined casing wedged between tidal stones. The object matched the dimensions of the Gulf Hope crates, but was partially torn open as though exposed to extreme heat. The crew reported nausea and dizziness soon after contacting it, and government handlers seized the item within hours, declaring the area off-limits. No radiation readings from that day were ever released. Around the same time, a cluster of unexplained livestock deaths hit farms across a rural inland corridor. Veterinarians noted severe cellular degradation in tissues, consistent with ionizing exposure, yet environmental tests detected nothing. One farmer recalled seeing a convoy of trucks, black, unmarked, escorted by federal vehicles, cross his property at dusk, stopping briefly near a disused culvert before disappearing into the highway. Days later, the culvert's soil tested slightly radioactive, though the official conclusion deemed it background variance. Meanwhile, internal memos leaked from a defense contractor referenced a mobile retrieval unit dispatched to locate a Type E fragment. The term fragment implied the missing cargo had broken apart, or was only one component of something larger. The memo's final line warned, exposure time threshold exceeded, containment priority escalated. As investigators dug further, another alarming detail emerged: 3 surviving crew members of the Gulf Hope, found drifting in a lifeboat days after the tanker's seizure, were placed into isolated medical custody and never publicly identified. One medic involved in their intake later admitted that all 3 exhibited radiation burns inconsistent with the ship's declared cargo. They muttered repeatedly about the crate that shook, claiming it emitted vibrations loud enough to rattle the lockers. But the most chilling statement came from the lifeboat's logbook, discovered years later in a warehouse auction. Written in shaky handwriting were 2 entries: "We shouldn't have opened it," and later, "It's not dead, it's moving." The context is unknown. The container they referenced was never confirmed to be the missing unit, yet the implication was unmistakable: whatever the crew encountered, it frightened them enough to abandon a fully operational tanker. The search centered first on the harbor facility, where security footage should have tracked every container that left the tanker. But investigators learned the cameras facing the cargo ramp malfunctioned for exactly 11 minutes during the offload, an outage that had never occurred before or since. The backup system failed simultaneously, corrupting all frames into static. For different technicians later swore the equipment showed no prior damage. Around this time, a forklift operator came forward with a troubling statement. He claimed that one of the crates, slightly smaller than the others, was moved not onto a truck but into a sealed warehouse bay, whose door was then padlocked by 2 men in unmarked uniforms. Within 48 hours, that warehouse bay was emptied, the lock removed, and the operators reassigned. Radiation logs from the same week show a sharp spike near the building, recorded at 2:13 a.m., though the official report dismissed it as instrument drift. Yet when independent auditors reviewed the data years later, they noted the spike was too abrupt and too localized to be drift. It resembled a contained release, the kind caused when shielding is temporarily compromised. Additional clues emerged with the rediscovery of the tanker's partial cargo manifest in a maritime archive. The document listed several items crossed out in red pencil, each annotated with a single word: relocated. The handwriting did not match any known officer aboard the ship. Even more puzzling was a final handwritten line: B17 chain complete, which appeared on no other shipping records anywhere. This phrase resurfaced in 1996 within an unrelated intelligence memo describing unauthorized circulation of B-17 assets, implying the designation referred not to a container number, but to a category of material. If that was true, then the missing container was part of a larger network of shipments, each one undocumented. The trail grew stranger when a retired Coast Guard sergeant revealed he had intercepted faint radio chatter the night the Gulf Hope signaled distress. The transmission contained only 6 words, repeated twice: transfer failed, secure the remainder. Analysts argue this message suggests the missing unit was either lost or intentionally removed before the tanker was boarded. Whether it went overboard, was taken by another vessel, or vanished during the ship's chaotic final hours remains unknown. But the sergeant insisted on one detail: the transmission did not match the tanker's radio signature. Someone else was out there. Within days of the Gulf Hope seizure, a quiet internal directive ordered all personnel involved in the boarding to undergo medical evaluation, though none had reported illness. Only later did two technicians admit that, during the inspection, they developed a metallic taste in their mouths, a classic early symptom of radiation exposure. Their accounts were buried under confidentiality agreements. Meanwhile, federal teams conducted a covert sweep of the tanker, removing navigation logs, radio transcripts, and crew rosters. What little information survived indicates the vessel had changed course abruptly 40 hours before the distress call, veering north toward colder waters for reasons never explained. Investigators who later examined the ship's autopilot memory found manual overrides consistent with a struggle on the bridge, repeated helm corrections, rapid throttle fluctuations, and a final input locking the engines at low idle. Beneath the bridge, an engineer's notebook was recovered containing a single intact page. Written hastily in pencil were the words, "Hold until transfer confirmed. Do not open under any circumstances." The note did not specify what was being held, nor to whom it was meant to be transferred. Yet deep within the restricted harbor's internal documents, an inventory sheet surfaced decades later referencing a classified offload, labeled Material Epsilon, consisting of 5 containers requiring shielded isolation. Curiously, the form listed 6 transport pallets, but recorded only 5 arrivals. 1 pallet was missing. Former dockworkers claimed that on the night the crates were moved, the ground beneath the lead-wrapped units vibrated faintly, as if the contents emitted a low internal hum. Shortly afterward, military couriers transported the containers inland toward a storage facility known for housing sensitive ordnance, but shipping logs marked only for departures. Again, the numbers did not match. The anomaly triggered quiet panic within the chain of command, evidenced by a burst of encrypted teletypes referencing lost asset risk scenario. That scenario, according to one declassified training manual, applied only to misplaced radioactive material capable of dispersal beyond physical containment. Publicly, the government insisted no hazardous material had been found on board. Privately, the hunt for the missing container had already begun. The story of the tanker Gulf Hope begins on a cold November evening in 1983, when the vessel drifted into the outer limits of a North Atlantic shipping lane, broadcasting a weak distress signal before falling completely silent. The ship had departed from an unnamed Mediterranean port with a declared manifest of industrial solvents and scrap metals, but internal customs records, later uncovered by investigative clerks, listed an additional entry marked only as Transit Load B-17, a designation that appeared nowhere in maritime codes. When a coastal patrol intercepted the drifting tanker, they found the deck abandoned, emergency lights flickering, and the engines cycling in irregular bursts as though someone had attempted to restart them repeatedly. The boarding team entered expecting mechanical failure, but instead discovered a sealed cargo bay at the stern reinforced with welded plates along the hinges, far beyond standard security requirements. A radiation counter carried by one of the inspectors ticked faintly near the door, registering low but distinctly unnatural readings. The team reported their findings, but within hours the vessel was placed under federal control, and all civilian personnel were dismissed under non-disclosure directives. Internal logs from the boarding crew revealed that the sealed bay had been at room temperature when they first approached it, yet as they withdrew their equipment, the surface of the metal door began to warm noticeably, rising several degrees in minutes. The readings were never publicly acknowledged, and the inspectors were later reassigned. Weeks after the tanker was towed to a restricted harbor facility, rumors circulated among dockworkers that crates from the bay were offloaded at night into unmarked trucks, each container wrapped in thick lead sheeting, with handwritten numbers scrawled over older stenciled codes. Those same workers reported that two trucks broke down inside the port perimeter, and a hazmat team arrived wearing suits with unfamiliar insignias, neither naval nor civilian. Official statements claimed the crates contained, corroded machinery parts. Yet photographic evidence later leaked to the press showed cylindrical canisters consistent with 1950s-era containment vessels used for radioactive isotopes. Each canister bore a single instruction on its rim: do not invert. But the most troubling discovery came from a set of warehouse logs referencing for containers by number, units 04, 07, 11, and 12, marked as received on the date of the tanker's seizure. Cross-checking with naval transport documents released decades later revealed only one problem: those for container numbers had never been documented on any ship, at any port, on any manifest. According to the official record, they did not exist, yet someone had unloaded them. And as investigators would soon learn, those containers had disappeared again before anyone could determine what they held or who they were meant for.